In this video, you will learn about opposites and absolute values. Now, opposite simply means you're changing the sign of something. So, for example, the opposite of 4 is going to be negative 4. And the opposite of negative 2 would be positive 2. So not too bad. With 0, just be careful. The opposite of 0 is just going to be 0. So with opposites, we can think of a negative sign as being the opposite of something. So this first example, when it says the opposite of 4 is negative 4, we can replace the word opposite with negative. So negative 4 is negative 4. Okay. For the next one, opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. So we can think of this as a negative. So a negative 2 equaling a positive 2, which is true. Two negatives would make a positive. And then the opposite of 0, we can replace the word opposite with a negative. So you can think of that as negative 0 equaling 0. And negative 0 is just going to be 0 anyway. So that would be a true statement. So here we're going to work with negatives a little bit. We have negative and then 6 plus 4. Now just make sure you follow order of operations. So you do the parentheses first and then do the negative after. So 6 plus 4 is 10. So we have negative 10, or the opposite of 10, which is negative 10. Okay, next we have the opposite, or negative 2.3. So the opposite of negative 2.3 would be a positive 2.3. The two negatives end up making a positive. Next we have this expression. So once again, follow order of operations. So we do the parentheses first. So we do negative 3 plus 1, and that would give me negative 2. So we have the opposite of negative 2, which would be positive 2. So the two negatives are making it into a positive number. Now here you're told to evaluate, where you have to plug in different numbers in place of the variables. Here we're given negative x plus 5, and you are told to evaluate if x equals negative 12. So what I do is, in place of the x, I put in a negative 12. So I have the minus in the front, so minus negative 12, and then plus 5. So the opposite of negative 12 would be positive 12. So we have positive 12 plus 5, which is equal to 17. So the two negatives are making a positive. Next we have the concept of absolute value. Your definition of absolute value is the distance from 0. So for example, the absolute value of 4 is going to be 4, because how far is 4 from 0? Well, 4 is 4 away from 0. Next example, the absolute value of negative 4 is also 4, because the distance from negative 4 right here over to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, would be 4. So the absolute value, or the distance, of negative 4 is 4. Now in math notation, I can write this quicker instead of with words. I can use this notation. So for the first example, the absolute value of 4 can be written like this, with two vertical lines on either side of the number 4. For the next example, the absolute value of negative 4 would be the same thing, but with a negative 4 on the inside of the two vertical lines. So if you were told to simplify this expression, the absolute value of negative 4 plus the absolute value of 12, you need to determine first what is the distance of each of these from 0. Well, the absolute value of negative 4, as we just stated, is 4. That is the distance that is from 0. And how far is 12 from 0? Well, 12 is just 12 away from 0. So we have 4 plus 12, which would equal 16. So notice what is happening. The absolute value is just making whatever's inside positive. So if it's a negative, it's positive. Positive would stay positive. And it's positive because absolute value means distance, and distance can never be negative, right? That doesn't make sense. If you said, how far did you travel to grandma's today? And you said, oh, I went -5 miles. That doesn't make sense. So there's no such thing as a negative distance, meaning absolute value cannot be negative either. All right, next we have this one. So we have the absolute value of -1 plus absolute value of 0 plus the absolute value of 3. So we just take each of these and make whatever's inside positive. So -1 is +1. 0 is just going to be 0. And then the 3 would just be 3 as well. So we add those numbers together, and our answer is 4. Okay, next we have to solve or simplify this expression. Don't get overwhelmed with the negatives. Just take one step at a time. Start with the absolute value first, because you can think of that as a grouping symbol. So with order of operations, that would be the same as a parentheses. So start with parentheses first, or absolute value in this case. So the absolute value of -3 would be a +3, and the absolute value of -5 would be a +5. So what we have is 2, and then this is being multiplied by 3, minus 4 times 5. So continue order of operations. We do multiplication next. So 2 times 3 is 6, and 4 times 5 is 20. So we have 6 minus 20, which would equal -14. We're going to take things one step further, where now we need to solve with absolute value. Here we are told that the absolute value of x equals 4. So another way of thinking of this is, what number is 4 away from 0? What number has a distance from 0 equaling 4? So if you think on the number line, okay, here is your origin. So which numbers have a distance of 4? Well, if I go over here, 4, +4, that would be 4 away from 0. So that would work. But on the other side, we could also have -4, because that is also 4 away from 0. So my answers would be +4 and -4. And I can test that. I can put in those numbers in for x. If I put in a -4, the absolute value of -4 would indeed equal +4. It's going to take whatever's inside and make it positive. And also the absolute value of +4 would equal +4. So my solution would be 4, or it could be -4. And this symbol right here just means therefore. So therefore x would equal 4, or x equals -4. Okay, here's another one. The absolute value of x equals -4. So the question is asking what numbers are -4 units from 0, or from the origin. Now this is kind of a trick question, because this is asking what distance, or what values for x has a distance of -4. Well, absolute value is distance, right? And distance can never be negative. So this distance cannot equal a negative number. So therefore, because we cannot have a negative distance, this would have no solution. So we can write in English words, no solution, or in math notation, we can use this symbol. This is like a 0 with a line through it. It means no solution, or it means empty set. And the reason, as stated, is because the distance can never be negative. All right, and lastly, we need to know how to translate into math notation. So if you were told the absolute value of -6 is greater than 1, how would you write this with math notation? So you take each phrase and look at it separately. So the absolute value of -6. If you look here, absolute value of -6 will be written with an absolute value sign, and then -6 inside of it. Okay, and then the next part is greater than, so the symbol for greater than would look like this. Okay, and then greater than what? Well, it's greater than 1. So write the number 1. So my expression can be written like this. The absolute value of -6 is greater than 1.